White smoke over the Sistine Chapel. These 4 words make the whole world freeze. Billions of people, not only Catholics, but also representatives of other confessions, atheists, politicians, and ordinary citizens, all turn their gaze to a small chimney in the heart of the Vatican. At this moment, history pauses to inscribe a new name in the 2,000-year chronicle of the papacy. The next conclave could be truly revolutionary. For the first time in the Church's history, there are real chances of electing a pontiff not from Europe, the cradle of Western Christianity, but from Africa or Asia, where Catholicism is growing at an unprecedented rate. This will not just be a change of leader, it will be a change of eras. An amazing paradox. In a world of instant communications and digital technologies, a little over 100 cardinals lock themselves in a medieval chapel, cut off from the outside world, to determine the future of the planet's largest religious organization using paper ballots and secret voting. No smartphones, no internet, no electronic devices, only prayer, reflection, and voting. The history of papal elections goes back to the first centuries of Christianity, when the Bishop of Rome was elected by the local clergy and people. Raise your hands, those who believe that the first pontifical elections were so simple and democratic. But with the growth of the influence and significance of the papal see, the procedure became more complicated, acquiring rituals and rules. The 8th century brought the first serious change. The right to vote was gradually restricted until it was concentrated in the hands of the cardinals. However, the real revolution occurred in 1274, when Pope Gregory X introduced the system of the closed conclave. The reason was prosaic. The previous election in Viterbo lasted almost 3 years. The exhausted cardinals could not come to an agreement until the angry townspeople removed the roof from the palace and put the electors on bread and water. Since then, the cardinals have literally been locked away. This is what the Latin word conclave means. The key is turned in the lock, and the princes of the Church are left alone with their conscience and the Holy Spirit. No external influences, no politics, only prayer and contemplation. However, history knows many attempts to interfere with the sacred process. Until the 19th century, some Catholic monarchs, emperors of the Holy Roman Empire, kings of France and Spain, had the right of veto over the candidacy of a new pope. This right was last used in the conclave of 1903, when the Austrian emperor blocked the election of Cardinal Rampolla. This interference so outraged the Church that Pius X immediately abolished the right of secular power to influence the elections. The 20th century brought new reforms. Paul VI limited the age of cardinal electors to 80 years, and John Paul II introduced the 2/3 majority rule for election at any stage of the conclave. Today, the election procedure is an amazing symbiosis of medieval tradition and modern adaptations. When the pontiff leaves this world or abdicates his throne, a period known as sede vacante, the vacant see, begins. The Camerlengo, the cardinal chamberlain, officially certifies the pope's death, breaking his personal seal and fisherman's ring. This symbolic gesture signifies the end of one pontificate and the beginning of a transitional period. For 9 days after the pope's death, solemn funerals are held, and cardinals from all over the world gather in Rome. This time is filled not only with sorrow, but also with intense preparation. Preliminary meetings, called general congregations, take place, where pressing issues of church governance and organizational details of the upcoming conclave are discussed. On the 15th day after the start of sede vacante, or earlier if all electors have already arrived, The cardinals enter the conclave. The ceremony begins with a solemn procession from the Sistine Chapel to the Pauline Chapel, where Mass is celebrated. Then the cardinals take an oath to observe the rules of the conclave and maintain the secrecy of the vote. When the doors of the Sistine Chapel close behind the last cardinal, the Master of Ceremonies utters the historic phrase, "Extra omnes," all out. Only the cardinal electors, medical personnel, and a few assistants for service remain inside. Voting begins on the very first day. Below, the cardinal writes the name of his candidate, trying to alter his handwriting to maintain anonymity. One by one, the cardinals approach the altar, raise the ballot above their heads, take an oath before God that they are choosing the most worthy, and drop the slip into the urn. After the votes are counted, the ballots are strung on a thread and burned together with chemical additives. Black smoke means that a pope has not been elected. White means that a new pontiff has been determined. 2/3 of the votes plus 1 are required for election. If after 13 days and 34 rounds of voting, a pope is not elected, the simple majority rule may be applied. But modern conclaves rarely go that far. Do you accept your canonical election as supreme pontiff? After an affirmative answer, the newly elected pope chooses the name by which he will be known to the world. Behind every conclave stand not only majestic ceremonies, but also little-known rituals preserved since the deep Middle Ages. Before cardinals find themselves behind the closed doors of the Sistine Chapel, each takes a solemn oath of absolute secrecy. Violation of this oath entails excommunication, the highest form of punishment in the Catholic world. Only the Pope can lift this excommunication. When the doors close, a real hunt for 21st century spies begins. A special team of technical experts sweeps all conclave premises, using the latest devices to detect listening devices. The Sistine Chapel and adjacent premises are transformed into a true fortress of information security. Radio interference generators are installed, blocking any electronic signals. Even the chapel floor is raised onto a special podium to exclude the possibility of eavesdropping from below. Special attention is paid to the voting ballots. After each round, they are not simply burned. They are first pierced with a needle through the word eligo, threaded onto a string, and only then committed to fire along with the counter records. This is done so that no scrap of paper with a candidate's name can leave the chapel. Daily during the conclave, the presence of electronic devices is checked using metal detectors. Cardinals are forbidden to carry phones, tablets, radios, or any other means of communication. The windows of the Sistine Chapel are covered with opaque curtains to exclude the possibility of transmitting signals from outside. These measures may seem excessive or even paranoid in the modern world, but behind them lies deep symbolism. The isolation of cardinals from the outside world is not just protection from interference. It is the creation of a sacred space where human judgment gives way to divine inspiration. The Church believes that it is in this isolation that the Holy Spirit can freely guide the hearts of the electors. The College of Cardinals is a special body of church governance that elects the new pope and simultaneously serves as his chief advisory council. Today, it represents all continents and regions of the world, reflecting the global nature of the modern Catholic Church. Only cardinals under 80 years of age have the right to vote in the conclave. This rule was introduced by Pope Paul VI in 1970. Their number is limited to 120, although the total number of cardinals may be greater. Today, the geographical distribution of cardinal electors differs dramatically from what it was just half a century ago. While Europeans, especially Italians, used to make up the majority, the picture is now much more diverse. Under Pope Francis, an unprecedented change in the composition of the college occurred. Over the years of his pontificate, he appointed many hierarchs from countries of the global south, Africa, Asia, and Latin America, as cardinals. Some of them represent countries that had never before had cardinals: Myanmar, Laos, Papua New Guinea. Francis also reduced the traditional predominance of Italians and Western Europeans. The age structure of the college has also undergone changes. The average age of cardinal electors today is around 70 years. This means that many of them will participate in a conclave for the first time, without experience from previous elections. But the most interesting changes have occurred in the ideological spectrum of the college. Francis appointed primarily pastors who share his vision of the church, more open, merciful, oriented towards the periphery, as cardinals. Many of them are known for their modest lifestyle and work with the poor. This created a certain counterbalance to the conservative wing formed under John Paul II and Benedict XVI. However, it would be a mistake to think that the College of Cardinals is divided into simple conservative and liberal factions. The reality is much more complex. Many cardinals from Africa and Asia, for example, may be progressive on issues of social justice, but conservative on issues of morality and liturgy. To participate in the conclave, a cardinal must take an oath of secrecy and renounce any forms of external influence. Cardinals over 80 years of age may participate in preliminary meetings, but do not have the right to vote in the conclave itself. In case of illness, a cardinal may be excused from participation, but cannot vote remotely or through a representative. The world of Catholicism is experiencing a tectonic shift. If for 2 millennia Europe was the center of the Catholic universe, today there is a historical shift in the center of gravity to the global south. The figures speak for themselves. In 1910, 65% of all Catholics in the world lived in Europe. Today, less than 24%. And this trend is only intensifying. In Africa, the Catholic community has grown more than 9-fold in the last 50 years, from 29 million to more than 200 million believers. The annual growth is about 3%. This is the fastest growth among all continents. In some African countries, for example, in Uganda or the Democratic Republic of Congo, Catholics make up more than half of the population. Asia, despite the fact that Catholics are still a minority there, shows impressive growth dynamics. The Philippines, the only predominantly Catholic country in Asia, is home to over 80 million Catholics. In India, despite the fact that Catholics make up less than 2% of the population, their absolute number exceeds 20 million people. Latin America remains the largest Catholic region on the planet. About 40% of all Catholics in the world live here. Brazil has more Catholics than any other country, about 130 million people. And what about Europe? The old continent is experiencing an unprecedented crisis of faith. In France, once called the eldest daughter of the Church, less than 5% of Catholics regularly attend Mass. In the Netherlands and Belgium, hundreds of churches are closing due to a lack of parishioners. Even in traditionally Catholic Italy and Spain, there is rapid secularization of society. This demographic shift creates a new reality that cannot be ignored. The cardinals gathered in conclave understand perfectly well. The Church of the future is the Church of Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And the choice of a pontiff capable of responding to the challenges of this new global church becomes critically important. Pope Francis, the first pontiff from Latin America, has already become a symbol of this global shift. But many observers believe that the next step could be even more revolutionary. the election of a pope from Africa or Asia. Such a choice would be not just a symbolic gesture, but a recognition of the new geopolitical reality of Catholicism. The African continent, long considered a periphery of the Catholic world, is today becoming its new center of attraction. It is here that the Church is growing fastest, and it is from here that fresh ideas and new breath for the 2,000-year-old institution of the papacy may come. For the first time in history, there is a real chance to see a native of Africa on the throne of St. Peter, a continent where Christianity has existed since the time of the Apostles, but has never given the world a head of the Catholic Church. Among the most prominent candidates is Cardinal Peter Turkson of Ghana. His biography is impressive. Born in a poor fishing village, he studied at the seminary, then was educated in Rome, where he defended his doctoral dissertation in biblical studies. Turkson headed important Vatican structures, including the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, and later the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development. His theological views combine traditional African adherence to family values with progressive ideas in social justice and ecology. Another serious contender is Nigerian Cardinal John Olorunfemi Onayekan. The Archbishop of Abuja is known as a master of interreligious dialogue, which is critically important in a country divided between Christians and Muslims. Onayekan has repeatedly mediated conflicts and earned the respect of leaders of various faiths. At the same time, he remains a firm defender of Catholic teaching on moral issues. Cardinal Fridolin Ambongo of the Democratic Republic of Congo brings unique experience of service in conditions of political instability. His voice is particularly loud when it comes to environmental protection and combating the exploitation of Africa's natural resources by international corporations. Ambongo is a Franciscan, and his simple lifestyle resembles that of the current pontiff. The election of an African pope could bring revolutionary changes. Firstly, it would be a powerful signal of the Church's true universality. Secondly, an African pope could better understand and address the problems of the rapidly growing communities of the global South: poverty, inequality, the consequences of colonialism. Thirdly, it would help the Catholic Church more effectively counter the growing influence of Pentecostal and charismatic movements, which are actively attracting believers in Africa. Asia is a region of astonishing contrasts for the Catholic Church. Here lies the largest Catholic country in Asia, the Philippines, where over 80% of the population profess Catholicism. And here, too, are countries where Catholics make up a tiny minority, less than 1% in Japan, Thailand, or Indonesia. It is this unique position that makes Asian cardinals especially valuable for the future of the Church. They live daily on the front lines of interreligious dialogue. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle from the Philippines is one of the most prominent figures among potential candidates. He is often called Asia's Francis for his warmth, humility, and special attention to the poor. Tagle heads the influential Vatican Dicastery for Evangelization of Peoples, a structure responsible for the missionary activity of the Church worldwide. His appointment to this position was seen by many as a sign of special trust from the current pontiff. No less significant a figure is Cardinal Charles Maung Bo from Myanmar, the first cardinal in the history of this country. His ministry takes place in extremely difficult conditions: military dictatorship, religious conflicts, poverty. Despite this, Maung Bo has managed to establish a dialogue with the Buddhist majority and has become the voice of oppressed ethnic minorities. His experience in balancing various cultural and political forces could be invaluable for the Universal Church. Cardinal Oswald Gracias from India represents another model of Catholic presence in Asia. In a country dominated by Hinduism, Catholics make up less than 2% of the population. Yet they manage thousands of schools, hospitals, and charitable institutions. Gracias is known for his diplomatic talent in relations with the Indian government and leaders of other religions. As president of the Federation of Asian Bishops' Conferences, he coordinates the work of the Catholic Church across a vast territory from the Middle East to Japan. What could the election of a pope from Asia mean? First and foremost, a revolution in the approach to interreligious dialogue. Asian hierarchs are accustomed to existing in an environment where Christianity is not the dominant religion. They have developed a special sensitivity to other spiritual traditions, the ability to find common ground with representatives of Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, and Confucianism. An Asian pope could bring a new understanding of inculturation, the process of adapting the Christian message to different cultural contexts. In Asia, this issue is particularly acute: how to remain faithful to Catholic doctrine while respecting millennia-old local traditions. How to speak of Christ in the language of cultures shaped by completely different religious concepts. The election of Pope Francis in 2013 marked a turning point in the history of the Catholic Church. For the first time in almost 1,300 years, the pontiff was not a European. Jorge Mario Bergoglio, Archbishop of Buenos Aires, brought with him not only an Argentinian accent, but also a completely new vision of the papacy, more humble, open, and directed towards the periphery. His choice of name, Francis, after the saint from Assisi, patron of the poor, became a programmatic statement of intent. 10 years later, it can be confidently said, the Latin American factor in the Catholic Church has strengthened as never before. Francis has appointed many hierarchs from Latin America as cardinals, including representatives from countries that previously never had cardinals, for example, Panama or El Salvador. As a result, today Latin American cardinals make up about 20% of all electors in a future conclave. Among the most likely candidates for the papal throne from Latin America, Cardinal Odilo Scherer from Brazil stands out. Archbishop of São Paulo, South America's largest metropolis, Scherer combines administrative talent with a deep understanding of social problems. His German roots and education in Rome make him a unique bridge between traditional European Catholicism and the new Latin American perspective. No less significant a figure is Cardinal Cristobal López Romero from Morocco, Spanish by origin, but who served for many years in Paraguay and Bolivia. His experience working both in Latin America and in a Muslim country gives him a unique perspective on interreligious dialogue and migration processes, key issues for the modern Church. Pope Francis's legacy extends far beyond geographical origin. He created a new paradigm of the papacy, less monarchical, more collegial, oriented towards dialogue with the modern world. His emphasis on mercy, ecology, migrants' rights, and criticism of rampant capitalism resonates with problems particularly acute in Latin America. Europe, the cradle of Catholicism and a 2,000-year papacy, is undergoing an unprecedented transformation of its role in the global Church. The continent, which gave the world 196 out of 266 pontiffs, for the first time in history, risks yielding the papal throne to a representative from another region. But does this signify the decline of European Catholicism, or merely the beginning of a new chapter in its history? Among European cardinals, there are still many prominent figures capable of leading the Church. Cardinal Jean-Claude Hollerich of Luxembourg, a Jesuit, polyglot, and president of the Commission of the Bishops' Conferences of the European Union, embodies the progressive wing of the European clergy. His commitment to environmental issues, openness to dialogue with the LGBT community, and critique of clericalism make him a peculiar successor to Pope Francis's line in the European context. At the opposite end of the spectrum is Hungarian Cardinal Péter Erdő, known for his conservative views and deep knowledge of canon law. The Archbishop of Budapest represents a region where Catholicism maintains strong positions, Central Europe. His election could symbolize a return to a more traditional understanding of the Church and its mission. Italian cardinals, traditionally dominant in conclaves, retain significant representation, but their influence is diminishing. Cardinal Matteo Zuppi of Bologna, head of the Italian Episcopal Conference, is considered one of the most likely Italian candidates. His experience working with the community of Sant'Egidio, known for its peacemaking activities, gives him particular weight amidst growing geopolitical tensions. However, European cardinals face a fundamental challenge: how to represent a region where Catholicism is experiencing a profound crisis. Empty churches, a shrinking number of priests, sexual abuse scandals. All these undermine the authority of the European clergy. In some countries, such as the Netherlands or the Czech Republic, practicing Catholics constitute only a few % of the population. Under these circumstances, European cardinals are forced to rethink their role. Perhaps the future of European Catholicism lies not in numerical superiority, but in cultural and intellectual leadership. Europe can offer the Church a rich theological tradition, experience in dialogue with secular society, and models of coexistence with other confessions. At the upcoming conclave, European cardinals will face a dilemma: to vote for, quote, zero candidate, risking being accused of Eurocentrism, or to support a representative from the global South, acknowledging the new demographic reality of Catholicism. Their choice will determine not only the future of the papacy, but also Europe's place in the Catholic Church of the 21st century. A conclave is not only a spiritual event, but also a political process of global scale. Throughout centuries, papal elections have been influenced by geopolitical forces, and the current conclave will be no exception. The international situation will inevitably reflect on who occupies the throne of St. Peter. Historically, external influence on the conclave took different forms. Until the 19th century, Catholic monarchs of Europe held the right of veto, the ability to block an undesirable candidate. This right was last used in 1903, when Austro-Hungarian Emperor Franz Joseph, through Cardinal Puzina, vetoed the election of Cardinal Rampolla, who was considered pro-French. This interference so outraged the Church that the newly elected Pope Pius X immediately forbade such practice under threat of excommunication. In the 20th century, influence took on more subtle forms. During the Cold War, the Vatican became an important player in the confrontation between the West and the Eastern Bloc. The election of Polish Cardinal Karol Wojtyła as Pope John Paul II in 1978 had enormous geopolitical consequences, becoming a catalyst for the fall of communist regimes in Eastern Europe. Today, world politics creates new lines of tension that will inevitably be reflected in the conclave. Relations with China are one of the key issues. The provisional agreement between the Vatican and Beijing on the appointment of bishops, signed under Pope Francis, has caused a mixed reaction. Cardinals from Hong Kong and Taiwan express concern about concessions to the communist regime, while supporters of the agreement see it as a step towards normalizing the situation of millions of Chinese Catholics. No less important are relations with the Islamic world. In conditions of growing tension between the West and Muslim countries, the future Pope's position on interreligious dialogue acquires strategic importance. Cardinals from countries with predominantly Muslim populations, such as Mong Bo from Myanmar or Sako from Iraq, possess unique experience of coexistence with Islam and can offer new approaches to this dialogue. The College of Cardinals, gathering to elect a new pope, reflects not only the geographical but also the profound ideological diversity of the modern Catholic Church. Beneath the outward unity lie fundamental disagreements on key issues of church life, which will inevitably manifest themselves in the dynamics of voting at the conclave. These ideological currents cannot be simplified into a mere dichotomy of conservatives versus liberals. The reality is far more complex and multifaceted. Traditionalists, comprising approximately a quarter of the college, advocate for the preservation of classical Catholic heritage. For them, the priority is the defense of doctrinal purity, liturgical grandeur, and a clear, hierarchical structure of the Church. These cardinals nostalgically recall the pontificate of Benedict XVI and believe that the Church should be a counterculture in a secularized world, rather than adapting to it. Their electorate is predominantly European and North American cardinals, as well as some African hierarchs. On the opposite flank are the progressives, supporters of Pope Francis's reformist course. For them, key priorities are the decentralization of church authority, greater collegiality in decision-making, social justice, and environmental responsibility. They strive for a church that reaches out to the peripheries, serving the poor and marginalized. Many cardinals from Latin America, Asia, and some Europeans gravitate towards this group. Between these poles lies the centrist majority, pragmatists seeking to find a balance between preserving traditions and necessary reforms. These cardinals may be conservative on matters of moral teaching, but progressive on social issues. Or vice versa, supporting liturgical innovations while maintaining a traditional understanding of church hierarchy. The key issues dividing the cardinals touch upon the very essence of modern Catholicism. Liturgical reforms remain a bone of contention. Should the Mass be celebrated facing the people or the altar? In Latin or local languages? With Gregorian chant or modern music? Behind these seemingly ritualistic questions lie deep theological disagreements about the nature of the priesthood and the participation of the laity in divine worship. No less sharp discussions are caused by the moral teaching of the Church, especially on issues of family and sexuality. Can divorced and remarried individuals be admitted to communion? How should same-sex unions be viewed? Should the Church adhere to unchangeable doctrine or seek new pastoral approaches in a changed world? These questions divide cardinals not along geographical lines. Conservatives and progressives exist on all continents. Media and the conclave, perhaps one of the most striking examples of the clash between antiquity and modernity. Imagine, in an era of instant news and live broadcasts, when any event becomes the property of billions in seconds, a ritual deliberately isolated from the outside world is preserved. It's like a time machine, transporting us to the 13th century in the midst of the 21st. The history of media coverage of conclaves is a history of gradually approaching a closed door. In the 16th century, news of the election of a new pope could take weeks to reach remote corners of Europe. In the 19th century, the telegraph reduced this time to hours. The 20th century brought radio and television, and the news of white smoke over the Sistine Chapel began to reach the faithful almost instantly. The conclave of 2013, which elected Pope Francis, was the first in the history of social networks. The hashtag conclave united millions of Twitter users who watched the smoke from the chimney via webcams. The joke that the cardinals could simply send a tweet with the text "Habemus Papam" instead of white smoke spread across the internet. However, behind this media carnival lies an unprecedented security system. The Vatican spends millions of euros to protect the conclave from modern technologies. Special devices create an electromagnetic shield around the Sistine Chapel, blocking any signals. Regular checks for bugs and hidden cameras are carried out. Personnel serving the cardinals undergo lie detector tests. Why such measures? History knows cases of leaks. At the conclave of 1922, an Italian newspaper published the voting results obtained from an informant inside. The scandal was so serious that Pius XI strengthened the oath of secrecy, adding to it the threat of excommunication for disclosing information. In the modern era, the Vatican has realized the need for a communication strategy during the sede vacante. The press center works around the clock with daily briefings. However, information is strictly rationed. Journalists are only told what does not violate the secrecy of the conclave. This paradox, medieval secrecy in an era of information transparency, creates a unique media phenomenon. Billions of people follow the chimney, having no idea what is happening behind closed doors. And in this unknown, the magic of the moment is born, when the whole world holds its breath, awaiting the white smoke. The first 100 days of a new pontificate are a period when the foundation for the entire reign is laid. Much like American presidents are judged by their first 100 days, a new pope has a limited time window to set the tone of his pontificate and outline priorities. History shows that it is during this period that gestures and decisions are born that will define the perception of the pope for years to come. When the white smoke announces the election to the world, a true marathon of symbolic actions and strategic appointments will begin. The first moments are especially important. The choice of a papal name is already a programmatic statement. When Cardinal Roncalli chose the name John the 23rd, he signaled a return to the pastoral tradition. Benedict XVI, with his name, indicated continuity with the European intellectual tradition. And Francis's choice of a name in honor of the saint from Assisi became a manifesto of simplicity and care for the poor. The next pope, especially if he is non-European, could bring about a revolution by choosing a name never used before, or by returning to ancient names from the first centuries of Christianity. The first sermon and the Urbi et Orbi blessing are another critical moment. Billions of people will listen intently to every word, analyze every gesture. An African pope could, for example, deliver part of the greeting in Swahili or Yoruba, immediately signaling a new geographical reality for the Church. An Asian pontiff could incorporate elements of Eastern spirituality into his first address. Key appointments in the Roman Curia will be the next indicator of direction. Historically, new popes often replaced the Vatican's Secretary of State, the second most important figure after the pontiff, and the heads of the most important dicasteries. If the new pope leaves in place the people appointed by his predecessor, it will be a signal of continuity. If, however, a large-scale reshuffle of personnel occurs, then the Church can expect changes. The Catholic Church stands at a historical crossroads. Before the future pontiff lies an unprecedented set of challenges that will require not only wisdom and holiness, but also strategic vision. The 2,000-year-old institution must find its way in a world changing at dizzying speed, while remaining faithful to its fundamental principles and traditions. Ecumenical dialogue will become one of the key areas of development. After decades of rapprochement with orthodoxy, Protestant denominations, and even non-Christian religions, the Church must decide how to move forward. Simple declarations of brotherhood are no longer sufficient. Believers expect concrete steps. Is joint communion with some Protestant churches possible? Is it realistic to overcome the millennium-long schism with orthodoxy? The answers to these questions will define the spiritual landscape of the 21st century. The role of the laity is another critical issue. In conditions of declining numbers of priests in many regions, the laity are taking on more and more functions in parish life. The synodal process, initiated by Pope Francis, has opened unprecedented opportunities for ordinary believers to participate in decision-making. The future pope will have to determine how far this democratization can go without diluting the hierarchical structure of the Church. The digital revolution poses unique challenges to Catholicism. On the one hand, technology provides previously unseen opportunities for evangelization. Live streams of masses, prayer apps, presence on social networks. On the other hand, the virtualization of religious experience undermines the very essence of Catholicism as an incarnate, sacramental faith. How to preserve the physical dimension of religious life in an era when more and more people prefer digital interactions to real ones? Secularization continues its advance in traditionally Catholic countries. In Spain, Ireland, Quebec, regions where Catholicism defined cultural identity for centuries, churches are emptying, and religious practices are becoming the lot of a minority. At the same time, a religious renaissance is observed in Africa, parts of Asia, and some regions of Latin America. The future pontiff will have to develop different strategies for these contrasting situations. The upcoming conclave is not just the selection of a new administrator for a global organization. It is a moment when the Church defines its place in a rapidly changing world. The choice between candidates from different continents with different theological views and pastoral approaches is a choice between different versions of the future of Catholicism.